Hi everyone and welcome back. We are talking about The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton, and this is the last part of our series, part 4, examining the themes. This is the last PowerPoint. There will be another one of me talking face to face about the end of the book, which I would like you to wait for so that you don't get any spoilers. So, there's a scene in the book where May is practicing archery, and I love this I love this depiction of it here with this painting. But at any rate, let's get started. So I talked last time at length about the different literary traditions that this book is sometimes placed into in terms of categorizing the novel. And nostalgia, on the one hand, which would fit in with the regionalist or local color tradition of writing, and then cynicism, which belongs more in the naturalist or modernist literary movements. Both of those are major themes in the book, and I'd like you to think about where you see the narrator or characters being nostalgic and where you think that there's a little bit more of a cynical tone. The fantasy of romance. This book is a romance, so look for how Newland fantasizes first about life with May, and then how he begins fantasizing about the Countess Olenska, in particular when reality of a life with May begins to settle in. I think that if you are looking at this from a nostalgic standpoint, he really is in love with Ellen. There are some hints of that in the fact that they knew each other as children. It seems like they had maybe a little first childhood crush. They used to play together. There are also some indicators that she may not be who she really appears to be. But it really is up for the interpretation of the reader. So again, that subjectivity I talked about last time. I love this painting. This is a pre-Raphaelite painting of a woman wishing a knight good luck on his journey. And I think in some ways, I'm going to ask you guys to discuss courtly love. Courtly love is an idea that between a knight and a maiden, they might have an understanding that they have an emotional bond that's not fully consummated by sex. And it seems to me that that's sort of, at least at first, what's happening with Newland and Ellen. The conflict of man versus society. Ellen is pitted as an individual against the whole of New York society. May is part of this society, but not necessarily against Ellen. In many ways, she's trying to help her to fit in. But Newland is really caught in between. He's protected by the society in which he lives, but he's also stifled by it. And I showed you guys that quotation from the book previously. Here we go. This quotation we talked about before where he feels himself oppressed by this creation, and May becomes kind of a symbol of that oppression in some sense in his mind, and in other sense she does not, because he does care for her. But he's also battling against this society with its very complex social rules, and I think that some people would just say, why does this matter, what people thought of them if they got a divorce? But you have to remember, too, that there is money involved, and it would be difficult for him to not just be accepted by other people in his society, but also to find a job. He might lose his inheritance and be cut out of the will or cut off from his family for whatever money he's earning from trust funds and things of that nature. And for the women in particular, they had few options that could, for work, let alone keeping them in the society which they're accustomed to. Marriage being a way to have money and to have security for women at that time. So marriage and divorce. Another theme, why do people marry? What are their motivations? Are they marrying for love? Is it just money? What other reasons are they marrying for? What effect does a divorce have on an individual, their family, and their community? And the discussion of divorce or the discussion of separation as well. This is Edith Wharton's home. I mentioned that she did a lot of landscape designing. You can see the beautiful landscaping there. Morality and hypocrisy. There are philandering men, Lawrence or Larry Leffert, who I haven't mentioned before, but he is a character I want you to watch for how he acts and how he's spoken about. We talked previously, Newland had an affair with Mrs. Rushworth, a married woman who was kind of seen as a little bit sad, a little bit silly. So the people of New York have these high moral standards on the outside, but underneath there is a lot of hypocrisy. And so again, there's a little bit of irony with this title, The Age of Innocence, for a lot of people who were not quite as innocent as they would appear. So affairs are looked down upon if they happened after marriage, but it depends who's having the affair, the man or the woman, and who they think is to blame and all of those kind of things. There's some gender role stuff there too. Old and new money. The social set of New York refused to allow certain people into their crowd. They really are like an aristocracy, even though we're in America. So this idea that, there's no kings and queens, but there's old money and there's the old guard, and the new people who have money are not really allowed in. So Julius Beaufort is someone who has recently acquired some wealth. So look to see how they treat him, how they talk about the Beauforts, how they talk about their parties. There are other people who have old money who don't really have the money anymore, but they're kind of still established in this society. So do people still go and call upon them even though they don't have the best food or the most fun entertainment? How are they deeming people worthy of being part of their crowd? The dapper gentlemen of the 1870s. The spheres of men and women. So gender roles and gender expectations. Men ostensibly run things, but a lot of them are in jobs where they do very little work. Those who are in a trade or business are really not thought worthy of being in this society. In contrast, the women of the society are often involved in the secret machinations behind the scenes. So they're deciding who's going to marry who's worthy of coming to what party, what to wear, what to do, who to give money to for various charities and things of that nature. They really decide who's accepted and who isn't. And much of their conversations are going to be hidden from Archer, which makes this narration, we talked last time about the unreliable narration. He really does have limited knowledge. A lot of the book takes place in his head, what he's thinking, what he's feeling, what he's fantasizing about, what he's hoping for, what he's dreading, all of that. So how he's pulled along by some of these women who may kind of be making decisions for him. I love this painting. This is about the same time, so you can see the extravagant dress here among this upper crust. Sex and sexuality. Women are supposed to be sexually innocent and expected to be loyal to their husbands. Husbands are presumed to be faithful to their wives, but infidelities are kind of ignored. It's not correct to have affairs after marriage, but for those that happen. Ellen seems to be outside of those restrictions. Again, this word bohemian comes up a lot with her. The fact that she is American but had been living in Europe, and isn't really part of this social set completely. So she's outside of these, but May is really within them. And their sexuality is completely tied. We saw that quote before of May's innocence. Innocence and purity are also words associated with May, and freedom is associated with Ellen. So think about how their sexuality is kind of tied to that. As such, Newland kind of romanticizes May, appreciating her innocence and purity. Then after marriage especially, romanticizes Ellen, appreciating her experience, her darker past, the fact she's a little bit older. And might have some experiences that May does not have. What would that look like? What would that be like? But again, think about the fact that these women are seen from Newland's point of view. This binary of a virgin and a whore, not that Ellen's a whore, but I don't mean it like that, but that's kind of the dichotomy or the dual nature of how he's seeing the women. And like kind of this picture here, right? This woman in pink who's being stared at by this guy and these two servants over here, while the women in white are a little bit more pure and not being stared at. It's sort of, that's what's going on. So what are the subtleties in between that the men, particularly Newland Archer, that they don't see? How is May possibly more manipulative or wise than Newland first thinks? Is Ellen the innocent wife who was, kind of done wrong by her husband? Is she a damsel in distress? Or does she kind of have machinations of her own and manipulations that she's trying to do? These characters, I think, these characters from his point of view are a little bit flat, but I think there's more going on beneath the surface than it first appears. So here is an excerpt. For the first time, he, that's Newland, perceived how elementary his own principles had always been. He passed for a young man who had not been afraid of risks, and he knew that his secret love affair with poor, silly Mrs. Thorley Rushworth had not been so secret to invest him with a becoming air of adventure. So right here we can see, right, those gender roles and expectations. He's got an air of adventure while she is poor and silly. But Mrs. Rushworth was that kind of woman. Foolish, vain, clandestine by nature, and far more attracted by the secrecy and peril of the affair than by such charms and qualities as he possessed. When the fact dawned on him, it nearly broke his heart, but now it seemed the redeeming feature of the case. So what is he saying here? The narrator is talking, but we're seeing it from Newland's point of view. And it is quite cynical in a way because she's that kind of woman. She likes having the affair and she doesn't really like him at all. There's also a little bit of nostalgia here, though, that this is, something that happened in the past, and now we can look back on it and say, well, that time is gone, and it's fine that she didn't actually love me. It's probably better that way. The affair, in short, had been that kind that most young men of his age had been through and emerged from with calm consciences and an undisturbed belief in the abysmal distinction between the women one loved and respected and those one enjoyed and pitied. So again, this binary we have here of the women that we love, those who are virginal and pure, and the ones we enjoy sexually, but then they're also to be pitied, so that they're used and then, they don't love them. They're using them for a purpose. In this view, they were sedulously abetted by their mothers, aunts, and other elderly female relatives who all shared Mrs. Archer's belief that such things happened. It was undoubtedly foolish of the man, but somehow always criminal of the woman. All the elderly ladies whom Archer knew regarded any woman who loved imprudently as necessarily unscrupulous and designing, and mere simple-minded men as powerless in her clutches. The only thing to do was to persuade him as early as possible to marry a nice girl and then trust her to look after him. So it's kind of interesting here, the gender roles that, on the one hand, it seems like the men are in control, that they're using these women, they're enjoying and pitying some, and then there's other women that they love and that they marry. But then in this last paragraph, we see that it's also that the women are deciding who's criminal and who's foolish. And it's the women also who are trying to marry these young men off so that they can still be part of acceptable society, right? And again, when we think about the themes here of money and high society and social rules and obligations, and then we ask if this is cynical or nostalgic, there's a lot going on here even in this short passage. So this is where I'm going to close, and I'd like you to think about these themes and how you see them throughout the book, and really also I want to see how you interpret them, and I want to hear your thoughts. And I can't wait to see what you have to say. In the last presentation, I'm going to talk about the end of the book, but make sure you don't watch that until after you read the novel. That's it. Thanks, everybody.